Okay, guys, we are continuing our reading of First Maccabees. We're going to try to do 5 through 8 today. We did last time. Okay, First Maccabees 5. When the Gentiles all around heard that the altar had been rebuilt and the sanctuary dedicated as it was before, they became very angry, and they determined to destroy the descendants of Jacob who lived among them. So they began to kill and destroy among the people. But Judas made war on the descendants of Esau in Idumea at Acrabattene because they kept lying in wait for Israel. He dealt them a heavy blow and humbled them and despoiled them. He also remembered the wickedness of the sons of Baan, who were a trap and a snare to the people and ambushed them on the highways. They were shut up by him in their towers, and he encamped against them, vowed their complete destruction, and burned with fire their towers and all who were in them. Then he crossed over to attack the Ammonites, where he found a strong band and many people, with Timothy as their leader. He engaged in many battles with them, and they were crushed before him. He struck them down. He also took Jazer and its villages. Then he returned to Judea. Now the Gentiles in Gilead gathered together against the Israelites who lived in their territory and planned to destroy them. But they fled to the stronghold of Dathema, and sent to Judas and his brothers a letter that said, "The Gentiles around us have gathered together to destroy us. They are preparing to come and capture the stronghold to which we have fled, and Timothy is leading their forces. Now then, come and rescue us from their hands, for many of us have fallen, and all our kindred who were in the land of Tob have been killed. The enemy have been captured, their wives and children and goods, and have destroyed about 1,000 persons there." While the letter was still being read, other messengers with their garments torn came from Galilee and made a similar report. They said that the people of Ptolemais and Tyre and Sidon and all Galilee of the Gentiles had gathered together against them to annihilate us. When Judas and the people heard these messages, a great assembly was called to determine what they should do for their kindred who were in distress and were being attacked by enemies. Then Judas said to his brother Simeon, "Choose your men and go and rescue your kindred in Galilee. Jonathan, my brother, and I will go to Gilead." We left Joseph, son of Zechariah, and Azariah, a leader of the people, with the rest of the forces in Judea to guard it. And he gave them his command: "Take charge of this people, but do not engage in battle with the Gentiles until we return." Then 3,000 men were assigned to Simon to go to Galilee, and 8,000 to Judas for Gilead. So Simon went to Galilee and fought many battles against the Gentiles, and the Gentiles were crushed before him. He pursued them to the gate of Ptolemais. As many as 3,000 of the Gentiles fell, and he despoiled them. Then he took the Jews of Galilee and Arbada with wives and children and all they possessed, and led them to Judea with great rejoicing. Judas Maccabees and his brother Jonathan crossed the Jordan and made 3 days' journey into the wilderness. They encountered the Nabateans, who met them peaceably and told them all that had happened to their kindred in Gilead. Many of them had been shut up to Bozrah and Bozor in Elima and Chaspho, Maked and Karnaim. All these towns were strong and large, and some had been shut up in the other towns of Gilead. The enemy are getting ready to attack the strongholds tomorrow and capture and destroy all these people in a single day. Then Judas and his army quickly turned back by the wilderness road to Bozrah, and he took the town and killed every male by the edge of the sword. Then he seized all its spoils and burned it with fire. He left the place at night, and they went all the way to the stronghold of Dathema. At dawn, they looked out and saw a large company, which could not be counted, carrying ladders and engines of war to capture the stronghold and attacking the Jews within. So Judas saw that the battle had begun, and that the cry of the town went up to the heaven with trumpets and loud shouts. And he said to the men of his forces, "Fight today for your kindred." Then he came up behind them in 3 companies, who sounded their trumpets and cried aloud in prayer. And when the army of Timothy realized that it was Maccabees, they fled before him, and he dealt them a heavy blow. As many as 8,000 of them fell that day. Next, he turned aside to Mepha and fought against it and took it, and he killed every male in it, plundered it, and burned it with fire. From there, he marched on and took Chaspho, Maked, and Bozor, and the other towns of Gilead. After these things, Timothy gathered another army and encamped opposite Raphon on the other side of the stream. Judas sent men to spy out the camp, and they reported to him, "All the Gentiles around us have gathered to him. It is a very large force. They also have hired Arabs to help them, and they are encamped across the stream, ready to come and fight against you." And Judas went to meet them. Now as Judas and his army drew near to the stream of water, Timothy said to the officers of his forces, "If he crosses over to us first, we will not be able to resist him, for he will surely defeat us. But if he shows fear and camps on the other side of the river, we will cross over to him and defeat him." When Judas approached the stream of water, he stationed the officers of the army at the stream and gave them this command: "Permit no one to encamp, but make them all enter the battle." Then he crossed over against them first, and the whole army followed him. All the Gentiles were defeated before him, and they threw away their arms and fled into the sacred precincts at Carnaim. But he took the town and buried the sacred precincts, burned the sacred precincts with fire, together with all who were in them. Thus Carnaim was conquered. They could stand before Judas no longer. Then Judas gathered together all the Israelites in Gilead, the small and the great, with their wives and children and goods, a very large company, to go to the land of Judah. So they came to Ephraim. This was a large and very strong town on the road, and they could not go around it to the right or to the left. They had to go through it. But the people of the town shut them out and blocked up the gates with stones. Judas sent them this friendly message: "Let us pass through your land to get to our land. To no one will do you harm. We will simply pass by on foot." But they refused to open to him. Then Judas ordered proclamation to be made to the army that all should encamp where they were. So the men of the forces encamped, and he fought against the town all that day and all the night, and the town was delivered into his hands. He destroyed every male by the edge of the sword and razed and plundered the town. Then he passed through the town over the bodies of the dead. Then he crossed the Jordan into the large plain before Bethshan. Judas kept rallying the laggards and encouraging the people all the way until he came to the land of Judah. So they went to Mount Zion with joy and gladness and offered burnt offerings, because they had returned in safety. Not one of them had fallen. Now, while Judas and Jonathan were in Gilead, and their brother Simon was in Galilee before Ptolemais, Joseph, son of Zechariah, and Azariah, the commanders of the forces, heard of their brave deeds and of their heroic war they had fought. So they said, "Let us also make a name for ourselves. Let us go and make war on the Gentiles around us." So they issued orders to the men of the forces that were with them and marched against Jamnia. Gorgias and his men came out of the town to meet battle. Then Joseph and Azariah were routed and were pursued to the borders of Judea. As many as 2,000 of the people of Israel fell that day. Thus the people suffered a great rut, because thinking to do a brave deed, they did not listen to Judas and his brothers. But they did not belong to the family of those men through whom deliverance was given to Israel. The man Judas and his brothers were greatly honored in all Israel and among all the Gentiles, wherever their name was heard. People gathered to them and praised them. Then Judas and his brothers went out and fought the descendants of Esau in the land to the south. He struck Hebron and its villages and tore down its strongholds and burned its towers on all sides. Then he marched off to go into the land of the Philistines and passed through Marissa. On that day, some priests who wished to do a brave deed fell in battle, for they went out to battle unwisely. But Judas turned aside to Azotus in the lands of the Philistines. He tore down their altars and the carved images of their gods he burned with fire. He plundered the towns and returned to the land of Judah. All right, 1 Maccabees 6. King Antiochus was going through the upper provinces when he heard that Elymais in Persia was a city famed for its wealth in silver and gold. Its temple was very rich, containing golden shields, breastplates, and weapons left there by Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian king who first reigned over the Greeks. So he came and tried to take the city and plunder it, but he could not because his plan had become known to the citizens, and they withstood him in battle. So he fled and in great disappointment left there to return to Babylon. Then someone came to Persia and reported that the armies that had gone into the land of Judah had been routed, that Lysias had gone first with a strong force, but had turned and fled before the Jews, that the Jews had grown strong from the arms, supplies, and abundant spoils that they had taken from the armies they had cut down, that they had torn down the abomination that had erected on the altar in Jerusalem, and that they had surrounded the sanctuary with high walls as before, and also Beth-zur is his town. When the king heard this news, he was astounded and badly shaken. He took to his bed and became sick from disappointment because things had not turned out for him as he had planned. He lay there for many days because deep disappointment continually gripped him, and he realized that he was dying. So he called all his friends and said to them, "Sleep has departed from my eyes, and I am downhearted with worry. I said to myself, to what distress I have come, and into what a great flood I now am plunged. For I was kind and beloved in my power. But now I remember the wrong I did in Jerusalem. I seized all its vessels of silver and gold, and I sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judah without good reason. I know that it is because of this that these misfortunes have come upon me. Here I am, perishing of bitter disappointment in a strange land." Then he called for Philip, one of his friends, and made him ruler over all his kingdom. He gave him the crown and his robe and the signet, so that he might guide his son Antiochus and bring him up to be king. Thus King Antiochus died there in 149th year. When Lysias learned that the king was dead, he sent Antiochus, the king's son, to reign. Lysias had brought him up from boyhood. He named him Eupator. Meanwhile, the garrison in the citadel kept hemming Israel in and around the sanctuary. They were trying in every way to harm them and strengthen the Gentiles. Judas therefore resolved to destroy them and assembled all the people to push them. They gathered together and besieged the citadel in the 150th year, and he built siege towers and other engines of war. But some of the garrison escaped from the siege, and some of the ungodly Israelites joined them. They went to the king and said, "How long will you fail to do justice and to avenge our kindred? We were happy to serve your father, to live by what he said and to follow his commands. For this reason, the sons of our people besieged the citadel and became hostile to us. Moreover, they have put to death as many of us as they have caught, and they have seized our inheritances. It is not against us alone that they have stretched out their hands. They have also attacked all the lands of their borders. And see, today they have encamped against the citadel in Jerusalem to take it. They have fortified both the sanctuary and Beth-zur. Unless you quickly prevent them, they will do still greater things, and you will not be able to stop them." The king was enraged when he heard this. He assembled all his friends, the commanders of his forces, and those in authority. Mercenary forces also came to him from other kingdoms and from islands of the seas. The number of his forces was 100,000 foot soldiers, 20,000 horsemen, and 32 elephants accustomed to war. They came through Idumea and encamped against Beth-zur. And for many days they fought and built engines of war. But the Jews sailed out and burned these with fire and fought courageously. Then Judas marched away from the citadel and encamped at Beth-zechariah, opposite the camp of the king. Early in the morning, the king set out and took his army by a forced march along the road to Beth-zechariah, and his troops made ready for battle and sounded their trumpets. They offered the elephants the juice of grapes and mulberries to arouse them for battle. They disturbed the animals among the phalanxes. With each elephant, they stationed 1,000 men armed with coats of mail and with brass helmets on their heads, and 500 picked horsemen were assigned to each beast. These took their position beforehand wherever the animal was. Wherever it went, they went with it, and they never left it. On the elephants were wooden towers, strong and covered. They were fastened on each animal by special harness, and on each were 4 armed men who fought from there, and also its Indian driver. The rest of the cavalry were stationed on either side on the 2 flanks of the army to harass the enemy while being themselves protected by the phalanxes. When the sun shone on the shields of gold and brass, the hills were ablaze with them and gleamed like flamingo torches. Now, a part of the king's army was spread out on the high hills, and some troops were on the plain, and they advanced steadily in good order. All who heard the noise made by their multitude, by the marching of the multitude and the clanking of their arms, trembled, for the army was very large and strong. But Judas and his army advanced to the battle, and 600 of the king's army fell. Now Eleazar, called Averon, saw that one of the animals was equipped with royal armor. It was taller than all the others, and he supposed that the king was on it. So he gave his life to save his people and to win for himself an everlasting name. He courageously ran into the midst of the phalanx to reach it. He killed men right and left, and they parted before him on both sides. He got under the elephant, stabbed it from beneath, and killed it, but it fell to the ground upon him, and he died. When the Jews saw the royal might and the fierce attack of the forces, they turned away in flight. The soldiers of the king's army went up to Jerusalem against them, and the king encamped in Judea and at Mount Zion. He made peace with the people of Besser, and they evacuated the town because they had no provisions there to withstand a siege, since it was a sabbatical year for the land. So the king took Besser and stationed a guard there to hold it. Then he encamped before the sanctuary for many days. He set up siege towers, engines of war to throw fire and stones, machines to shoot arrows, and catapults. The Jews also made engines of war to match theirs and fought for many days. But they had no food in storage because it was the 7th year. Those who had found safety in Judea from the Gentiles had consumed the last of the stores. Only a few men were left in the sanctuary. The rest scattered to their own homes, for the famine proved to be too much for them. Then Lysias heard that Philip, whom King Antiochus, while still living, had appointed to bring up his son Antiochus to be king, had returned from Persia and Media with the forces that had gone with the king. Then that he was trying to seize control of the government. So he quickly gave orders to withdraw and said to the king, to the commanders of the forces, and to the troops, "Daily we grow weaker. Our food supply is scant. The place against which we are fighting is strong, and the affairs of the kingdom press urgently on us. Now then, let us come to terms with these people and make peace with them and with all their nation. Let us agree to let them live by their laws as they did before, for it was on account of their laws that we abolished that they became angry and did all these things." The speech pleased the king and the commanders, and he sent to the Jews an offer of peace, and they accepted it. So the king and the commanders gave them their oath. On these conditions, the Jews evacuated the stronghold. But when the king entered Mount Zion and saw what a strong fortress the place was, he broke the oath he had sworn and gave orders to tear down the wall all around. Then he set off in haste and returned to Antioch. He found Philip in control of the city, but he fought against him and took the city by force. All right, got First Maccabees 7 is next. Okay, in the 151st year, Demetrius, son of Seleucus, set out from Rome, sailed with a few men to a town by the sea, and there began to reign. As he was entering the royal palace of his ancestors, the army seized Antiochus and Lysias to bring them to him. But when this act became known to him, he said, "Do not let me see their faces." So the army killed them, and Demetrius took his seat on the throne of his kingdom. Then there came to him all the renegade and godless men of Israel. They were led by Alchemius, who wanted to be high priest. They brought to the king this accusation against the people: "Judas and his brothers have destroyed all your friends and have driven us out of our land. Now then, send a man whom you trust. Let him go and see all the ruin that Judas has brought on us and on the land of the king, and let him punish them all and all who help them." So the king chose Bacchides, one of the king's friends, governor of the province beyond the river. He was a great man in the kingdom and was faithful to the king. He sent him, and with him he sent the ungodly Alchemist, whom he made high priest, and he commanded him to take vengeance on the Israelites. So they marched away and came with a large force into the land of Judah. And he sent messengers to Judas and his brothers with peaceable but treacherous words. But they paid no attention to their words, for they saw that they had come with a large force. Then a group of scribes appeared in a body before Alchemists and Bacchides to ask for just terms. The Hasidians were first among the Israelites to seek peace from them, for they said, "A priest of the line of Aaron has come with the army, and he will not harm us." Alchemists spoke peaceable words to them and swore this oath to them: "We will not seek to injure you or your friends." So they trusted him, but he seized 60 of them and killed them in one day, in accordance with the word that was written. The flesh of your faithful ones and their blood they poured out all around Jerusalem, and there was no one to bury them. Then the fear and dread of them fell on all the people, for they said, "There is no truth or justice in them, for they have violated the agreement and the oath that they swore." Then Bacchides withdrew from Jerusalem and encamped in Bethzath. And he sent and seized many of the men who had deserted to him, and some of the people, and killed them, and threw them into a great pit. He placed Alchemists in charge of the country, and left with him a force to help him. Then Bacchides went back to the king. Alchemists struggled to maintain his high priesthood, and all who were troubling their people joined him. They gained control of the land of Judah and did great damage in Israel. And Judas saw all the wrongs that Alchemists and those with him had done among the Israelites. It was more than the Gentiles had done. So Judas went out into all the surrounding parts of Judea, taking vengeance on those who had deserted and preventing those in the city from going out into the country. When Alchemists saw that Judas and those with him had grown strong and realized that he could not withstand them, he returned to the king and brought malicious charges against them. Then the king sent Nicanor, one of his honored princes who hated and detested Israel, and he commanded him to destroy the people. So Nicanor came to Jerusalem with a large force and treacherously sent to Judas and his brothers this peaceable message: "Let there be no fighting between you and me. I shall come with a few men to see you face to face in peace." So he came to Judas, and they greeted one another peacefully, but the enemy were preparing to kidnap Judas. It became known to Judas that Nicanor had come to him with treacherous intent, and he was afraid of him and would not meet him again. When Nicanor learned that his plan had been disclosed, he went out to meet Judas in battle near Kafar Salama. About 500 of the army of Nicanor fell, and the rest fled into the city of David. After these events, Nicanor went up to Mount Zion. Some of the priests from the sanctuary and some of the elders of the people came out to greet him peaceably and to show him the burnt offering that was being offered for the king. But he mocked them and derided them and defiled them and spoke arrogantly. And in anger he swore this oath: "Unless Judas and his army are delivered into my hands this time, then if I return safely, I will burn up this house." And he went out in great anger. At this, the priests went in and stood before the altar and the temple. They wept and said, "You chose this house to be called by your name and to be for your people a house of prayer and supplication. Take vengeance on this man and on his army, and let them fall by the sword. Remember their blasphemies, and let them live no longer." Now Nicanor went out from Jerusalem and encamped in Beth Horon, and the Syrian army joined him. Judas encamped in Adasa with 3,000 men. Then Judas prayed and said, "When the messengers from the king spoke blasphemy, your angel went out and struck down 185,000 of the Assyrians. So also crush this army before us today. Let the rest learn that Nicanor has spoken wickedly against the sanctuary, and judge him according to his wickedness." So the armies met in battle on the 13th day of the month of Adar. The army of Nicanor was crushed, and he himself was the first to fall in battle. When his army saw that Nicanor had fallen, they threw down their arms and fled. The Jews pursued them a day's journey from Adasa as far as Gazara, and as they followed, they kept sounding the battle call on the trumpets. People came out of all the surrounding villages of Judea and they outflanked the enemy and drove them back to their pursuers, so that they all fell by the sword, not even one of them was left. Then the Jews seized the spoils and the plunder. They cut off Nicanor's head and the right hand that had so arrogantly stretched out, and brought them and displayed them just outside Jerusalem. The people rejoiced greatly and celebrated that day as a day of great gladness. They decreed that this day should be celebrated each year on the 13th day of Adar. So the land of Judah had rest for a few days. All right, first Maccabees 8 is the final chapter we'll read today. Now Judas heard of the fame of the Romans, that they were very strong and were well disposed toward all who made an alliance with them, that they pledged friendship to those who came to them, and that they were very strong. He had been told of their wars and of the brave deeds that they were doing among the Gauls, how they had defeated them and forced them to pay tribute, and what they had done in the land of Spain to get control of the silver and the gold mines there, and how they had gained control of the whole region by their planning and patience, even though the place was far distant from them. They also subdued the kings who came against them from the ends of the earth, until they crushed them and inflicted great disaster on them. The rest paid them tribute every year. They had crushed in battle and conquered Philip and King Perseus of the Macedonians and the others who rose up against them. They also had defeated Antiochus the Great, king of Asia, who went to fight against them with 120 elephants and with cavalry and chariots and a very large army. He was crushed by them. They took him alive and decreed that he and those who would reign after him should pay a heavy tribute and give hostages and surrender some of their best provinces, the countries of India, Media, and Lydia. These they took from him and gave to King Eumenes. The Greeks planned to come and destroy them, but this became known to them, and they sent a general against the Greeks and attacked them. Many of them were wounded and fell, and the Romans took captive their wives and children. They plundered them, conquered the land, tore down their stronghold, and enslaved them to this day. The remaining kingdoms and islands, as many as ever opposed them, they destroyed and enslaved. But with their friends and those who rely on them, they have kept friendship. They have subdued kings far and near, and as many as have heard of their fame have feared them. Those whom they wished to help and to make kings, they make kings, and those whom they wish, they dispose, and they have been greatly exalted. Yet for all this, not one of them has put on a crown or worn purple as a mark of pride. But they have built for themselves a Senate chamber, and every day 320 senators constantly deliberate concerning the people to govern them well. They trust one man each year to rule over them and to control all their land. They all heed the one man, and there is no envy or jealousy among them. So Judas chose Euphlemus, son of John, son of Echos, and Jason, son of Eleazar, and sent them to Rome to establish friendship and alliance, and to free themselves from the yoke, for they saw that the kingdom of the Greeks was enslaving Israel completely. They went to Rome, a very long journey, and they entered the Senate chamber and spoke as follows. Judas, who is also called Maccabees, and his brothers, and the people of the Jews have sent us to you to establish alliance and peace with you, so that we may be enrolled as your allies and friends. The proposal pleased them, and this is a copy of the letter that they wrote in reply, or bronze tablets, and sent to Jerusalem to remain with them there as a memorial of peace and alliance. May all go well with the Romans and with the nation of the Jews at sea and on land forever, and may sword and enemy be far from them. If war comes first to Rome or to any of their allies in all their dominion, the nation of the Jews shall act as their allies wholeheartedly, as the occasion may indicate to them. To the enemy that makes war, they shall not give or supply grain, arms, money, or ships, just as Rome has decided, and they shall keep their obligations without receiving any return. In the same way, if war comes first to the nation of the Jews, the Romans shall willingly act as their allies, as the occasion may indicate to them. And to their enemies, there shall not be given grain, arms, money, or ships, just as Rome has decided, and they shall keep these obligations and do so without deceit. Thus, on these terms, the Romans make a treaty with the Jewish people. If after These terms are in effect. Both parties shall determine to add or delete anything. They shall do so at their discretion, and any addition or deletion that they make shall be valid. Concerning the wrongs that King Demetrius is doing to them, we have written to him as follows. Why have you made your yoke heavy on our friends and allies, the Jews? If now they appeal again for help against you, we will defend their rights and fight you on sea and on land. All right, guys, that's it for First Maccabees 4, 5 through 8. We'll pick up First Maccabees 9 next time. Bye.